My name is Randy Howell, and you're listening to the Faith and Fishing Podcast.
Welcome to the Faith and Fishing Podcast, where every episode I'll bring you an interview with a member of the fishing community, and they'll be sharing their faith stories and fishing memories with you. I'm your host, Cam Steele. Hey y'all, welcome back to the Faith and Fishing Podcast. Just before we get started on this episode, just a couple of housekeeping things. I am still dealing with that same cough that I've been dealing with for the past couple episodes now. So if you're watching, you may see me mute and then start coughing, or if you're listening, you may hear maybe some of the noise in the background mute out while I cough and everything. So bear with me. I will get better eventually. We may have a couple storms coming through. So if we end up hearing some, as my dad would like to call them, thunder boomers or some rain dripping, it'll just add to the ambiance. I will say by the time this episode comes out, I believe you'll be able to listen to me on the Christian Outdoors podcast, sharing my story and talking kayak fishing. So be sure to check that out. I'll leave links in the show notes. And yeah, y'all remember I had Pete on a while back, and he returned the favor, let me come on his. So that was a lot of fun. Definitely encourage you to check that out. So with all of that being said, let's go ahead and get our guest this week introduced right after this. With 30 years of experience of handcrafting lures under his belt, Mr. B of Mr. B Lure Company is making high-quality spinnerbaits, buzzbaits, jigs, underspins, swim blades, and more right here in the U.S. All of his skirts are hand-tied, and all of his baits feature a baked-on powder paint, all metal components, and only Owner and Gamakatsu hooks. All of his baits come in a variety of colors, and if you purchase a bait in the Battle Shad color, 30% of the proceeds go to the Wounded Warrior Project. To see the quality for yourself, go to MrBLureCompany.com, that's MRBLureCompany.com, to place your order and use promo code FAITHNFISH, POD 1X10 at checkout to save 10% on your first order. Get Outdoors Pedal and Paddle in Greensboro, North Carolina offers a wide range of products and services designed to help protect the environment and enhance the time people spend enjoying the outdoors. With an expansive year-round inventory of kayaks, SUPs, bikes, kayak fishing accessories, paddling clothing, biking accessories, and more, Get Outdoors has established itself as one of the top paddle sports and biking shops in the Southeast. They also offer a wide range of kayak safety and technique courses to get you comfortable in your new boat. They'll even get it rigged up for you. Stop by the shop in Greensboro, North Carolina, or check them out at shopgetoutdoors.com. Something y'all all know about me, if you listen to the podcast or have been listening to the podcast for a while, is that I struggle whenever it comes to keeping things simple on the water. From gear to tactics and everything in between, I am an expert at overcomplicating things. And this week's guest is an expert in the other direction. We've got Aaron Sexton from ASAP Fishing in here. Aaron, man, welcome to the show.
Welcome, man. Glad to be here. Really glad to be here. I'm changing positions really quick. I know it looks weird. I'm sorry, but I've got some ambient noise going on in my room too. So we've got two daughters, and they have sound makers in their room, and I feel like that's kind of catching it. So I'm gonna move over to this area. Plus, it has better lighting. So
Yeah, man. So, is my audio coming through good for you?
yeah, coming through great.
Okay, yours is kind of staticky a little bit, like it's not really clean, like maybe the internet connection's not perfect, but we will power through, and if hopefully it'll get better here. But yeah, man. So why don't you go ahead, start us off by introducing yourself to our listeners and tell us who Aaron Sexton is.
All right, there we go. I don't know what happened. everything's pro.
All right, man. So, yeah. So to get us started off, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to our listeners? Tell us who Aaron Sexton is.
Yeah, my name is Aaron Sexton. I am my full-time job is a student ministries pastor. That's a really fancy way of saying youth pastor. I've been doing that for 11 years now. Absolutely love it. Most guys are in the Instagram, social media type thing to make that a full-time gig. I'm not. I love what I do for a living. It's what I'm called to do. And fishing is kind of just something that I'd left for a while and picked back up when, the big pandemic happened, and none of my friends were interested. So I started an Instagram page called ASAP Fishing. And the goal was, when I got back into it, it was so much different than when I was growing up doing it with my dad. There were so many more lures and so many more techniques and things. And so I really just kind of wanted to focus on what is the simplest thing I can do to catch fish and kind of share that with everyone else, not make it so complicated or necessarily expensive. So, that's who I am and what I do.
Awesome, man. So, so how long ago was it that you started ASAP?
2 years now, which is crazy because it doesn't seem like it's been that long ago. It literally feels like just last year I started it. But yeah, no, it was 2 years ago. Right in the middle of the pandemic.
That's awesome. So, so whenever you started ASAP, had you been started the Instagram and stuff, had you been kind of working your way back into fishing already, or was that just something that, like, before you even started jumping back in, you kind of said, I want to do this, I want to kind of use this as maybe journaling or like a record keeping, or just kind of share my experience? What was the kind of goal behind it?
Yeah, so originally, what I had a buddy that I worked with, and his in-laws have 2 stock ponds, and we weren't able to go out and do our normal thing and like go to restaurants and hang out. And so he was like, hey, do you guys want to come fish our stock pond or whatever? And I was like, yeah, sure. I love fishing growing up. I haven't done it in forever. I'd love to just go out there and see if I can catch something. And so we went to those stock ponds, and the first fish I hooked, I was Texas rigging. I was actually using an ugly stick, which is what I used growing up. Like I vividly remember saving up to buy an ugly stick when I was growing up. He had one, and so I was using that, and I just had this little Texas rig crawl on there and caught this 2-pound bass, and was immediately like, oh yeah, like I remember why I liked doing this. Okay. And so I went out and got my own ugly stick again, same setup and everything I had when I was growing up, because it's what I remembered, and just everything I needed to Texas rig stuff. And, went out, started fishing, started catching fish, started catching good fish, bigger fish than I ever caught when I was growing up, and would come home and kind of tell my wife, like, oh, I would talk to her about the techniques, not just the fish I was catching and show her the pictures and stuff, but like, okay, here's a technique I use to do this. And she just kind of looked at me like, that's great. All sounds like Chinese to me, but I love it. Sounds great. And none of my friends were really into fishing. Like, my buddy had, his in-laws had the 2 stock ponds, but he wasn't like out there all the time. And he likes to say I went from 0% fishing to 100% fishing overnight. Like, that's literally how it happened. But because I didn't really have anyone to kind of bounce ideas off of, and the only place I could go for techniques and stuff was Instagram or YouTube, I was like, well, maybe I should start my own fishing page to just kind of be a part of the community. And it has evolved into not just being a part of the community, but giving input into the community, which I think is really, really cool, because I'm just a normal guy. People see me on Instagram and may think that I'm something. I'm not. I don't view myself in that way. So, yeah, if you know, it's not like if you see me out in public, I'm going to be like, oh, I'm too good. Like, no, I would love to talk to you about fishing because I have no one else to talk to about fishing. So, yes, please come. Let's have a conversation.
Absolutely. And I'll go ahead and throw my name into that too. I'm the same way. Yeah, man. So let's talk about the fishing community and kind of getting into it. And so yeah, has there been a moment so far that it's like, now I'm part of the fishing community?
Absolutely. I'm a storyteller, so I may be a little bit long-winded in this, but I'm also a believer, and I believe that God works everything out for a purpose. And when I started this page, my dad called me and told me about, he had been out bank fishing and saw a man. He called me and he was like, son, you're never gonna believe what I saw today. I saw this man in a kayak that he was pedaling with his feet and he was fishing out of it. And I was like, what? Because growing up, the only kayaks I saw were like the rentable kayaks you can get from like the river float places. And so I thought that's all a kayak was good for. It was just like if you want to go take a float and be leisurely or whatever. And he was like, no. And so he told me the guy explained it to him. And I looked it up, and it was an Old Town topwater PDL. And I saw that kayak and was like, that's awesome. But I did not have the money for that kayak. So I started looking around for other fishing kayaks, and I actually found a Pelican Castaway 100 at Tractor Supply. So if you're looking for a cheap kayak, hit up Tractor Supply because they have them. But I drove 30 minutes to Tractor Supply in another city away from me, picked it up, and could not have been more excited. I remember the first time I got that thing on the water, I didn't catch anything, but to be on the water and not on the bank was just everything, right? Like I was just so jazzed about it. And so I started going out every weekend, and I was like, I wonder who else does this. So I kind of already had my fishing page, got my kayak fishing stuff started, to kind of be a part of the community, get ideas and things like that. And then I found this guy who has been on this podcast. His name is Brandon Mays, that bass fishing dude. I started following his page, and he ran this giveaway for a kayak, like a really nice fishing kayak. And I was like, I want that kayak. And so legitimately for a month, every single day, I tagged every person on my personal Instagram in that giveaway. And I won it. I won that giveaway. I won the kayak that he was giving away. And that led to, he was working with a company called Austin Canoe and Kayak, which unfortunately is no longer in business anymore. That's a super sad thing. I love those guys and what they were doing. But through Austin Canoe and Kayak, I got connected with Brandon, like on a personal level. And so we were messaging back and forth. He was giving me tips and tricks, and because he had a Big Fish 120 as well, and so he was telling me all the things that I could do. And that just kind of kept rolling as my Instagram kept growing. And then this year in April, I got a message in my inbox from Brandon and Charlie Wells, Digital Wells, on Instagram, and they were inviting me to go on a fishing trip with him to Oklahoma to just hang out, fish, and make content. And that's when I was like, okay, I'm a part of the fishing community now, because I was in the room with guys like Lone Star Kayak Fishing, that bass fishing dude, Digital Wells, Jolden Fishing, Casty Fishing, like all these guys that, are much better anglers than me. And, they wanted me to be there, had a blast being there, getting to know them. But that's when I was really like, yeah, now I'm like, I'm a part of that community. Like they recognize me as a voice, and that was really cool. Cause like I said, I'm just an average dude. So to have that happen was super awesome.
Absolutely. That's awesome. And let's talk about your ministry a little bit too. So what age groups do you work with?
Yeah, so I do 6th grade all the way through 12th grade. So think literally 12-year-olds to 18-year-olds. That's the gambit that I cover. And we meet every Wednesday night. And we're a larger church. We're not like a mega church, but we're not small either. But we're also one of those that haven't split the junior high from the senior high. And I don't know if that's coming or not. Maybe it's something I'm still praying through and working through. But man, I love it. I absolutely love working with students. There's a camp that we do here in Arkansas called Super Summer Arkansas. And I've been out of church for a while. When I was 11 years old, I've been going to a church that my grandparents would take me to. I was involved in a youth ministry there. And I remember in 6th grade, I went to that church, and I grew up poor, like really poor. Like one of my favorite meals is Spam and fried potatoes with pork and beans, because that's what my dad would make for us. Like that's how poor we were. And I would go to that church and just get made fun of because I'm in Walmart clothes and, wearing no-name brands. And I thought to myself, if this is what it means to be a Christian, then I don't want to be one. I'm 12 years old. And so I literally, that church was down the road from my house. I walked out, and I just didn't go back. I didn't want to go back until I had a friend that I was in Boy Scouts with who was at a different church in town. And he was like, hey, our church is going on a paintball trip. Do you want to go? And I was like, well, yeah, never played paintball before. I wasn't super jazzed about, it being a church group thing, but I was like, if I can go play paintball, I'll go play paintball. But when I showed up, man, the guys that were there acted like I had always been there. Like they were interested in me. They wanted to get to know me. They definitely extended a lot of love, a lot of hospitality. And so that made me want to go back on Wednesday nights. And I went for months, and then we went to this church camp. Like the youth pastor then got me a scholarship so that I could go for free. Had somebody else pay for me. And so I went to this camp, and that's where I truly gave my life to Jesus. And because I realized it wasn't about following rules or just trying to be good, that he's not this guy that sits on a cloud and blesses us when we do good and punishes us when we do bad, but really wants to have a relationship with us. And that's what I remember about that experience is I'd heard about God my whole life, but I'd never heard about knowing God and that being what Christianity is all about. And so I made that decision. I said, I want to know God. And from there, so that was 16. 2 years later, at 18, I got my call to ministry. I just really felt God pushing heavily on my heart that he wanted me to be involved in ministry. I thought it was going to be music ministry because after camp, I got super involved in the youth group, especially learning to play guitar and leading worship. And then I got to college, and all of my friends that I had in that youth group that I came from kind of just left their faith. And that really bothered me because it was like their influence on me and everything I'd gone through in that youth group was just so impactful to me. I was like, how can you just walk away from this now that you're on your own? And at that same time, I was, to keep a scholarship that I had, I was serving at a church in Dallas and was working with the youth there and just, loved it and was convinced that if I wanted to prevent that from happening for students in the future, then student ministry is where I needed to be. And just had a peace about that. Felt like that's exactly where God wanted me. Kept going back to Super Summer every year to staff and work with students. Now I'm on the leadership team for that camp. I met my wife at that camp. Incidentally, her dad is the one that started that camp many, many years ago. So that camp's played a huge part in helping me figure out what it means to be a Christian, what it means to be a minister, how to do ministry right and lead students. But man, I love it. Like I love hanging out with students and helping them figure out what it means to truly love and know God. At our church, we use a phrase called helping people find and experience God's best. That God has a plan for your life that is best for you because he made you, he designed you, and we want to help you figure out what that is. And that's what I am all about in my student ministry. I want them to understand, like, there are eternal things constantly at play, and those are what you need to be focused on. And those eternal things are what should impact your everyday life. So that's what I do. That's what my ministry is like. I love it.
That's awesome. I wanted to touch on something. It Whenever you said, other people from your youth group that you grew up in, kind of they get out of high school into college, and they kind of leave their faith. Some end up coming back, but most of them kind of that's they get out of school, and they just kind of keep on going and don't look back.
Right.
And it's kind of always been that way to some extent, but it feels like it's a lot more prevalent now than it used to be.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is?
Quite honestly, I think it's because the model for youth ministry is a lot of fun and no faith. So I can remember all of the fun things that we did as a youth group, that just drew tons of kids there. And even when I was in college, like the larger churches that had larger youth groups that had a little bit more money to throw around would do like iPad and iPod giveaways and all, just to kind of draw kids there. And they'd do all these fun things, and the fun things aren't bad because kids want to have fun, right? But all of that was the main thrust of what youth groups did. And then it was like a little devotional, whatever, from the youth pastor, and then they kind of all left. But there wasn't a teaching on, doctrine, on theology, on what it really means to be a Christian, like the things that the Bible calls us to do and tells us to do. And so I think that's the main reason, is because they're not grounded in their faith. They're not truly being discipled by the people that are in the youth group. Like it kind of runs as a business, like youth pastors hate being called babysitters, but they treat their job like that's what they are. Like, you drop your kids off. My job is to make sure that they have fun, get a little bit of knowledge, and then send them home. And that's not discipleship. And
Right.
I can remember the reason that I kept going in the faith is because of some key people in my life, not just my youth pastor that took an interest in me, but my small group leader and my Sunday school teacher that would call me, text me, meet with me outside of there. And I even had students. One of my best friends, his name is Eric Michaels. He just started to invite me to lunch. And he was like, I'll pay for it. And of course, first rule in life is you never turn down free food, right? So when he started inviting me to lunch and offered to pay for it, we just sat down, and he was like, so tell me why, what's your testimony? What, how do you know that God was calling you to be a Christian, and why you needed to be a Christian? And then we started to talk about deeper things, and we started to read books together. And it was because of those men who invested in me, who discipled me, that I am who I am, and I do what I do. I would not be here without those men in my life. And I think that more student ministries need to leverage the people that they have in their church, the volunteers that they have in their youth ministry, and equip them and enable them to invest in students. A lot of youth ministries are a one-man show, and I don't want to be that, because then what happens if, the trend in youth ministry right now is the average length of time a youth pastor spends at a church is 4 years. So that's one group of students from freshman year to their senior year, and then they graduate and then they're gone because of, they're either climbing the ladder or they're burned out or whatever. And it's because there's no stability there. There's no long-term investment there. And so I think that's what the big problem is, you're not teaching them the core of the faith and what that really means. And they're not being discipled by enough people, and enough people aren't being, I don't want to put the blame. I feel like I sound like I'm putting the blame on youth pastors themselves. I'm not. I work in the church world. I understand the challenges and things that they face, but to equip and enable your volunteers and people in the church to invest in your students and speak into their lives like I had people speak into mine is just invaluable. That is what keeps them going for the long term.
Absolutely. Yeah. I worked as a youth pastor for a little while, and I will say I'm a lot better at being the volunteer
Yeah.
and being where the rubber hits the road and ministering to the student than I am at being the leader of the group of volunteers. It's kind of like, I can't remember who it was that I was talking with, and he said, once your church and your ministry reaches a certain size, you end up being more the pastor to the kids rather
Right.
than being the pastor to the kids. And
Right.
that was definitely the weakness for me, for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, every time we get to talking about youth ministry on this podcast, I always ask, what is your favorite age group to work with?
My favorite age group to work with is probably the age group that no one likes to work with, and that is the 8th and 9th graders.
Okay.
Because they're just right there at figuring out who they want to be, and I want to help them discover that in a world that tells them who they should be constantly, that tells them that, one of my favorite things to use when I'm talking to our boys is the story of Jacob and Esau, because Esau was a man's man. He went out, worked the fields, he hunted, all of that. But Jacob stayed home with mom, and he was more artsy. He liked to cook, that kind of stuff. Were either one of them more or less of a man because of it? No. God gifted Jacob with those talents and those gifts and those abilities, and he gifted Esau with those talents and those gifts and those abilities. And so, especially for guys in this world, it tells them, if you're this way, then you're a man's man. But if you're this way, then you're probably homosexual or bisexual or whatever. And that's just not true. God has given all of us gifts and given all of us the personality he has given us for use in bringing others into the kingdom. And I want to help them figure out what those gifts are, why God has made them the way that he has made them, and show them how to use all of that to reach people that need to be reached for the gospel. Because I love talking to football teams. One of my favorite things to tell football teams is, I'll ask them, what do you think real strength is? What do you think it means to be really strong? And I usually get answers like, well, who's can lift the most, or who's the fastest, or whatever. And I'm like, okay, I get that. But can you say no when you need to say no? So like if you're dating a girl and another girl slides into your DMs, can you say no to that? That's real strength. Because the truth is most high school guys can't do that. So yeah, you can squat 450 pounds and bench press like 230, but you can't say no when you need to say no. You can't say no to yourself when you want to play video games instead of doing your homework or reading your Bible. So helping them see what it really means to be strong, and the characteristics that we think come along with strength really don't play any part of it. That's what we see in the story of Saul and David. Like Saul the king was everything you would picture a king to be, and he was terrible at it. And David was a teenager and was way better at it than Saul was. So much so that Saul got jealous and tried to kill him. So, that's what I just want to help them figure that out and see those things. Like if you're not a nerd because you like, playing video games more than playing sports, your mind just works in a different way. And God wants to use that, you're not necessarily a brainless jock because you like to put on pads and a helmet and smack the snot out of people. God has gifted you to use that to like the strong man and the smart man are gifted for two different roles. And I just want to help that group who is just so influenceable figure out who they are in Christ before the world tells them who they should be in the culture.
That's awesome. Yeah, I personally, I love working with middle schoolers. So like that 6, 7, 8, 8th grade range is definitely my favorite. So I always get the same that you probably do whenever you say that 8th and 9th grade is your favorite. You're crazy kind of reaction.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, that is awesome.
Well, they're wild. Like they are. They're wild. You take them to camp. They don't shower. It's just a weird age, But I mean, I love them. I do.
Absolutely. Yeah, I could sit here and talk youth ministry all night, but I definitely want to get a little bit of fishing talk in too.
Well, I love that stuff too. And if we shift into Star Wars, I'm good with that as well. Like those are the three things that I'm really big on: faith,
Awesome.
fishing, and the Force. You know what I'm saying? Like it's just all.
That's awesome. Yeah, for sure. I will say not all of Star Wars for me, but most of it. So
yeah, if you're talking about the last three movies, yeah, I agree with you on that.
Yeah, I can't. I didn't even watch the last one. So, but I am starting to work my way through Obi-Wan though, and
that was good.
I'm really enjoying that so far. So,
good.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing where it goes. So, no spoilers, everyone. All right, man. So, there's a couple questions that we always try to make sure we ask all of our guests on here, and my favorite is what fishing story or memory means the most to you?
What fishing story or memory means the most to me? That's a tough question because I have a lot of good fishing stories. I think the one that means the most to me is something that came at the end of a fishing trip and doesn't really involve fishing. So my dad, when I was growing up, I fished with him. I mean, like I remember it's 3:00 in the morning, him coming into my room, waking me up and was like, come on, we're going fishing, and we would do the thing where you like stopped at that little podunk gas station and got your breakfast sandwiches or whatever and got your snacks for the day and then headed out on the water. Well, we had Dad had a Ranger bass boat, but we didn't have anything to haul it with. Like he had his work truck, but didn't want to take his work truck, didn't want to hook his trailer up to the work truck. And so my papaw had a 1950, it was like a 1950s or 1960s Ford that, and I remember it was rust. Like it didn't have a color. It was literally made of rust. It was so old, but that thing ran. My papa used that for all kinds of work. So that's what we would hook it up to. So we take it out to the lake, we fish all day. I don't even remember if we did well or not. I just remember we get back to the boat ramp and my dad's got it parked, and my job is to stand by the truck while he rolls it up on the trailer. I'm probably, I don't know, 10 years old. And he gets it onto the trailer and he's trying to center it. And so he pushes the throttle and gets it up centered, and it hits that front where like you're going to latch it down, right? Where the ratchet strap is. He hits that. I mean, bumps it, just barely like tap. Well, when he did, it kind of shifted the weight of the truck, and I heard this clunk. Like if you've ever been in an older truck where you have to pull the emergency brake handle and the emergency brake flies up and makes that sound, that's the sound I heard. And that truck started rolling backwards into the lake. I'm 10. I have no idea what to do. So I just grabbed the front bumper and with all of my strength and trying to pull this thing backwards from falling into the water. And it's just dragging me like I'm nothing, because I'm 10 years old. I probably weigh 80 pounds. I don't know. And my dad, of course, like leaps out of the boat, is swimming towards the truck as fast as he can. And the whole thing came off the ramp and went into the water. All you could see was 6 inches of the corner of the top of the cab. And so we're sitting there. Dad swims back to the boat, which is now floating away from us. He swam back to the boat, got into it, and pulled it up on the bank. And he came. I'm, in the water up to my knees. He's sopping wet. He stood there. I'll never forget. He just goes, "Well, that's not good." And that's literally all he said. And then he walked off and called the tow truck, and ended up, they took the truck, they dried it out, they flushed the motor, and it is still running. One of my uncles has it, and it is still going. So no harm, no foul there. But yeah, that's just one of those things where it's total father-son bonding thing, where he just stood there. On the way home, I'll never forget, he said, "Just don't tell your mother." I was like, okay.
Oh, that is awesome. And it's funny you mentioned the Podunk gas station breakfast too, because that's 100%, that was 100% it, because even if we weren't bass fishing, like that's where we went, and that's where we got our crickets or our
minnows
or our night crawlers. Like that's where we stopped for bait too. So it was the same one. Whenever you were out fishing with somebody, man, what are you typically talking about? Like, what's your conversation centered around?
Several things. My mind kind of moves a mile a minute. But typically when I'm out on the water with somebody, I've gotten a lot of opportunity. Like I said, none of my friends, my close friends, really fish at all. So, it's not like we're out there talking about life, talking about our families or anything like that. But, I've tagged in my posts like the area that I'm in and things like that. I've been on the water and have followers kayak up to me and be like, "Are you ASAP fishing?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And they're like, "That's awesome." And so then like they'll DM me and I fish with them. I go and fish with my followers, which I love to do, because for me, it's, if any of my followers are listening to this, like, I love you, and I'm going to work faith into all of our conversations. So like, if you haven't noticed by now, that's what I'm doing. That's what I'm doing. But yeah, so it's usually that, like, I want to get to know them. I want to just figure out like who they are and hear about their life and make a friend. But all for the purpose of, if they have a relationship with Jesus, helping them grow their faith. And if they don't have a relationship with Jesus, helping them find their faith. So that's typically, that, and like, what bait are you using, that kind of thing. Or, are you seeing them on your depth finder? Because I'm not seeing them on my depth finder. Like, do you think it's going to be a long paddle from this spot to this spot? Like, it's typical, like, technical fishing stuff. That's usually, but most of the time, if I'm out in the water, man, I just like having conversations. I love telling stories. I love hearing stories. I love to laugh. So if you can tell me a story that makes me laugh really hard, we'll probably be friends for life.
That's awesome. All right, man. Well, with all of our guests, we do a segment called "What's Your Favorite?" It's pretty self-explanatory, but I'll ask you your favorite in a few different categories, and we are going to get that started right after this. Whether you're a Ned Rig vet or a finesse fishing noob like me, Jade's Jigs is your source for high-quality finesse jigs that raise the bar by being lead-free. Using a tin bismuth alloy not only makes Jade's Jigs eco-friendly, it also makes the jig lighter so you get the same profile with less weight for the fish to feel. Check out jadesjigs.com, that's JADESJIGS.com, to see their full lineup of jigs, styles, and colors. And since you're a Faith and Fishing listener, you can save 10% on your order by using promo code FNF10 at checkout. All right, man. So to get what's your favorite started, what is your favorite scripture?
My favorite scripture is Colossians 3:14. I'm pretty sure it's Colossians 3:14. Colossians is my favorite book. Colossians chapter 3 is my favorite chapter. And Colossians 3:14 is my favorite verse. Because in Colossians 3, Paul starts out talking about how we should set our minds on the things that are above, not on the things that are below. And then he tells us how to do that. So he gives us like a checklist. He says, put to death all that is earthly within you. And he goes a list of what those earthly sinful things are. And then he says, instead, put on these things, which are the complete opposite of everything that he just went over. And when you look at it together, it's like, that's a lot to do. Like, that's a whole lot to do, to think through every day and all of that. But then he wraps it up really nice in the end. And I love the ESV version because it says, above all these things that I've just mentioned, above all of these, put on love, which binds everything together in perfect harmony. And he's just echoing what Christ tells the rich young ruler when he comes to him and says, how do I have eternal life? And Jesus says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. So if I love God with all that I am and all that I have, and I love my neighbor as myself, that getting rid of sin and putting on the holy, righteous character of God begins to happen naturally. And so it's not a checklist that I have to go through every single day. It's something that is a byproduct of my love for God and my love for others. So that's why it's my favorite.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, man. What about a favorite story from the Bible?
A favorite story from the Bible. Again, if you can make me laugh, that's one of my favorite things. So I have two. Both of them are in Job. And Job's not my favorite book, but I think Job is one of the funniest books. So Job is sitting there with his friends, and they're telling him why he might be going through the situation that he's going through. If you've never read the book of Job, basically Job is the most righteous man in the area. The devil makes a wager with God and says, I bet I can get Job to give up his faith. And God says, okay, try it. And literally destroys Job's life. His children die. He loses his grandchildren. He loses everything that he owns. Basically, all he has left is the house that he lives in and his wife, who then turns on him and says, you should just curse God and die. And so his friends show up, and like, they're legitimately trying to be helpful. They're like, let's think through why this might be happening, Job, so that we can solve this problem. And while they're talking, Job says, look, God, if this is a test of who is stronger, behold, you are mighty. Like, he basically just says, God, if you're just trying to see if I know who's stronger in this relationship, like, I definitely know it's you. Like, no doubt. Like, you have no more to prove. You are absolutely stronger than anything in the universe. So please stop trying to prove your power. If that's what you're doing, please stop, because I get it. So that's one of it. And then in Job 41, I'm an apologetics nerd. I really geek out over apologetic stuff. And my students in my youth ministry know this about me. And I was going through an apologetic series, and we got to the topic of dinosaurs and how, you know, if you look at all the discoveries and things that they found, and you look at all of the issues with carbon dating and the fossil records and things that we have, what you find out is that dinosaurs and humans actually.
You are frozen. So if you are talking right now, I apologize. We cannot hear you. And yeah, he's going to drop out here and try to come back in and see if that. There he is.
Hey, okay. Sorry about that. So the term dinosaur didn't even come into existence until 1898, right? Before that, they were called dragons. Every culture in the history of the world has a mythology of dragons. And in Job 41, you see why. God is trying to show Job that he doesn't have to answer to anyone because he is the creator of the universe. Basically, he's telling Job, look, just trust me. I know what I'm doing, right? But he does this through explaining things that he's created. One of those things being the animal Leviathan. And when he describes Leviathan in Job 41, he says that he has scales that are like shields of armor that overlap, and that when he sneezes, it flashes fire, and that his nostrils stream smoke. And God is describing for Job, number one, something that Job would have seen and known about, and he's describing a fire-breathing dragon. And I really nerd out over that. So, yeah, those are my two favorite Bible stories.
Awesome. What about your? Sorry about that. What about your favorite fish to catch?
Largemouth bass, hands down. That's always what I'm out there after. I had an instance one time where I accidentally caught a chain pickerel. Never seen one. Didn't know what it was. Thought it was an alien. There were so many teeth. It was in a local pond that I fish. It's only like, they call it a lake. It's a pond. It's like 80 acres. It's not very big, but I go there to like practice. I call it practice pond because I go there to practice techniques and things like that. And I was fishing a spinnerbait one spring morning and hooked up and was reeling it in and thought it was a really good sized bass. And turns out it was this long, slimy, toothy thing. I had no idea what it was. It was a chain pickerel. So I like catching those. I caught a bowfin before with a chatterbait. I don't know why he ate a chatterbait, but he did, and he was a pretty hefty guy. But yeah, hands down, my favorite thing to catch is largemouth bass.
Awesome. What about your favorite to fish for?
My favorite to fish for is the same, because for me, it's the hunt. Like just figuring out where they are and how I can catch them. Like, you know, I think I don't really like the term skunking because, I mean, I know it's a thing. I have skunked a lot, but I always learn something, especially not to do. Like one of my favorite quotes from Thomas Edison is when they asked him, they were like, it took Thomas Edison 2001 tries, I think, to make the right filament to create the light bulb. And they were talking to him about it. And they said, why didn't you give up after failing so many times? He said, I didn't fail. He said, I just learned 2,000 ways not to make a light bulb. And so that's how it is for me in fishing. Like I learn every day how not to catch a fish. And so I try and not do that the next time I go out, so yeah, but I love fishing for largemouth bass, and especially power fishing for largemouth bass, because I think I don't want to put people off, because again, the whole point of teaching people to fish as simply as possible is find what you enjoy and fish that way, and don't let anybody change your mind about it. Like I follow Tyler's Real Fishing on YouTube. I follow bass, tactical bassin, and I follow all those like Bass Geek and all those guys that give tips and tricks, and they kind of make it seem like if you're not doing that thing at that time of year, you're not going to catch anything. And that may be true, but I have been in situations where I'm just like, I'm going to fish what I want to fish in 30-degree weather, and I'm still pulling fish out of the water, So fish, I don't want to put anybody off by saying this, but I love power fishing. Like if I want to constantly be turning my reel. I want to constantly be working the end of my rod. Like I love fishing chatterbaits. My favorite, I think this is a question later, so I'm going to save it, but I have a favorite lure that I love to fish because of that. And yeah, so I love to power fish for largemouth. Like how can I get a bass to react to what I'm doing and not just necessarily like, what are they feeding on? Like I want to fool them into biting something. Cause for me, that's the challenge and that's the win.
Awesome. And, let's see. I know a lot of people consider it sacrilege, but let's see if we can go 3 for 3. What is your favorite fish to eat?
My favorite fish to eat is largemouth bass. So
there we go.
I had never eaten bass. I'd only eaten catfish and crappie my whole life until I went to the Oklahoma trip. And Brandon was like, have you ever eaten bass before? And I was like, no, because I was like you. Like most people are like, how dare you eat them? Turns out it's actually really good for conservation to take out small fish and eat them and stuff like that. Like it's very scientific. It's a fact. You can look it up. I know that there are people out there that are like, let them go, let them grow. I get that. I understand it. But conservation-wise, it's not the best. Like, especially if you want to catch big fish consistently in your fisheries. But, yeah, we caught some. We strung them up. We took them back. And Brandon himself cooked it. And it was the best fish I have ever had in my life. Just the way it tastes, its texture. It's the best. It is the best.
Awesome. I don't know that we've ever gone 3 for 3 on those 3 questions. So
look, I'm a simple guy. So
awesome, man. So while we're talking about cooking and eating, what's your favorite fishing snack?
My favorite fishing snack comes from that podunk gas station that I grew up going to. When I leave to go fishing, it used to be just a standard sausage, egg, and cheese McMuffin, and then they came out with McGriddle, so I changed it to that because the McGriddle is just one of the greatest things that God has ever blessed man with. But my favorite snack is the Austin cheese and peanut butter crackers. When I was growing up, I just called them the orange crackers because that's what they are. They're orange with peanut butter in them and a cherry Coke. That is my favorite. Like I could eat that all day and it wouldn't bother me.
That is awesome. So I don't know about where you come from, but in my neck of the woods, we call them nabs. So
I've never heard that term before. No.
Okay, yeah. So pretty much any square cracker with something in the middle of them, we call them nabs.
Right. Well, I'm the only one that I know of that eats them consistently and loves them as a favorite snack. And so for me, they're just the orange crackers. Like that's what I tell my wife when she goes to the store. Hey, I need more orange crackers.
That's awesome. All right, man. So you teased it earlier. What is your favorite lure to throw?
My favorite lure to throw is the swim jig. It is, in my opinion, the most versatile lure that you can throw. You can drag it down points, across rock. You can swim it above grass. You can hop it, bump it. Anything that you want to do with a swim jig, you can do. And you can flip a swim jig. You can cast and wind a swim jig. Like it's just the most versatile thing out there. I always have one tied on. And if I'm trying a new technique that doesn't work out and I give up and just want to catch fish, I'll tie on a swim jig. And it works every time.
I've caught a couple fish on a swim jig, but it's not a confidence lure yet. I'm still working on that. But yeah, I can. Whenever you get one and you get that chance to have that home run hook set, it's definitely is worth it. That's for sure.
Well, and so for those out because I found that the swim jig is something that most people don't fish a lot because they don't know how. They view it like they view a swim bait because you typically pair a swim jig with a paddle tail swim bait, right? But the Alabama shake and the hop hop pause are going to be your best friend when you fish a swim bait, because what you want to do is get that skirt moving. That it's a swim jig is all about that skirt because it makes it, that's what gives it its life, right? And so I'll if I'm fishing a paddle tail swim bait, or I'll use the Rage Menace or something like that on the back of it, but cast it out, and then as you reel it, it's called the Alabama shake. You literally just shake your rod tip as you're reeling it in. You can do it at whatever speed, you can drop it at whatever depth, and you just shake it like that, and it gets that, as it comes to the water, just pop, 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 pop. Or if they're being real finicky, you throw it out and you just go pump up and reel, pump up and reel, and so this comes to the water, it'll hop hop and kind of fall, hop hop and kind of fall. And that's really on like hot days like it was today, they'll smash it because it'll hop hop like it's getting away from them, and then it'll start to fall. And when it starts to fall, they'll, I mean, hammer it. So yeah, those two techniques are going to be your best bets.
Awesome. I love getting some juice on here. All right, man. So, what about a favorite body of water to fish? I don't need secret spots or GPS coordinates or anything like that, but body of water.
Well, I have no secret spots, and I'll tell you why. I want to get people into fishing however I can. Especially want to get them involved in paddle sports because, again, just to find a way to get off the bank and explore is a large part of why I like kayak fishing. And so I don't have secret spots. Like if I'm at a lake or I'm talking to my story, I will tell you where I am, because two reasons. I want you to catch fish, and if I show up and you're in my spot, I have to find another one, and that's a challenge for me. And to become a better fisherman, a better angler, I need to learn to fish things that I'm not comfortable with, right? So I don't have secret spots. But there's a lake here. It's called Lake Norrell. And it is, it's got everything you could want in a lake. It's got grass, it's got rock, it's got timber, it's got docks. I love fishing Lake Norrell. It is, I think at its deepest point, it's like just over 100 feet.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, it's got, I mean, like you can, I've never caught a fish on a jerkbait, so I constantly go out there and practice, trying to catch a fish on a jerkbait when they're suspended. I learned how to run crankbaits out there over rock and timber, and of course grass, running chatterbaits and swim jigs and all that fun stuff out there. And of course, if you want to slow down, like you can throw your wacky rigs in there or your Texas rig, whatever. And there's some really good, there's just some solid sized fish in there. Like I don't know who's in charge of that lake, but they're doing a great job as far as conservation and health of the fish in there. Because I have yet to pull a fish out of there that looks unhealthy or spawned out or whatever. Like there's good, nice, healthy fish in there.
Awesome. And last but not least, what is your favorite time of year to fish?
I really think the pre-spawn is probably my favorite time to fish. And I know that sounds weird because everyone looks forward to the spawn. And that's just because fish are abundant and ready to eat and easy to catch. But during that pre-spawn time period, no one's on the water. There's no pleasure boaters out there. Most guys who are just kind of into fishing, but not really, are like, oh, it's too cold today, I'll stay home. Oh, it's too windy today, I'll stay home. And so, like, I have been, Lake Norrell is just over a few hundred acres, and there are times I've been there in the pre-spawn, I'm the only one on the water. I can look in any direction and not see anybody, and so everything, and there's very little pressure. The pre-spawn is my favorite time to fish. It's cold. You have to have a lot of endurance and patience, but there's just no one out there, and there's no pressure, and those fish are coming up and getting ready to feed, and I just think it's a blast.
Awesome. Well, we are going to start wrapping things up, man. if you would, let us know what is coming up next for ASAP Fishing.
Well, I've got some. I've been trying to get good footage of this lake. I actually went there today and was finally able to get some good footage together. And then my camera overheated, and I missed 2 catches. But I went to a place up in Conway, which is just a little bit over an hour away from me, and I'm not very good at fishing a frog. I literally caught my very first fish on a frog last week. So after 2 years of trying, but this lake has miles of lily pads, dense lily pads, cypress trees, things like that. So that video is rolling out on YouTube. I'm going to do some more kind of walk through things that I do, because right now if you go to my Instagram page, it's just like me catching fish or me messing up while trying to catch fish. But really kind of want to do a little bit more of like, here's how I do things, because I think that'll help a lot of people. You know, like the crate that I use, I custom built. I don't have a black pack or anything like that. And so I just want to show off a little bit more of my gear to hopefully inspire people. Because I feel like so many times people are being told what to buy, and I don't want to tell them what to buy. I want to inspire them to make things themselves, because that's the simplest way to do things. It's customized. You know, it works for you, and that's what you should do when you're on the water. So a few more things like that, but really, I've got finally starting to get some of my very first ambassadorships, I guess you could call it. I just got a ambassadorship with Savage Angler Apparel. They make great gear at a really great price, at performance gear. I wear it every single time I'm in my boat. Keeps me cool, keeps me dry, keeps the sun off of me. It's not an ambassadorship yet, but had someone send me a pair of cross kicks that I love for kayak fishing. They're great shoes. They keep you stable, and they're quick drying. They're awesome. And so kind of exploring that realm. You know, I never thought when I first started my Instagram that it would be like, hey, people want to send me things to try out and use and promote. And so just doing a little bit more of that. I would love to be, in the future, I would love to be a voice for the people to companies, if that makes sense. You know, a lot of times, like I said, a lot of times you're being told what to buy. And I would like to tell companies kind of like, here's what you should make.
Awesome. And you already mentioned a couple that you're starting to work with. If there's any other sponsors or supporters or just anybody you want to give a shout out or say thank you to, the floor is yours.
Yeah. I mean, everybody that follows me on Instagram, man, I really appreciate it. I've said it already in this podcast, but I'm just an average dude. Like, I have a normal day job. I've got a wife and kids, and fish for fun on the weekends. I don't plan to make a career out of it. So thank you to everybody that follows me. That truly does mean a lot. It means even more when you want to talk to me and interact with me on Instagram, or if you find me in person. So thank you for that. Definitely want to shout out, you know, the guys that took me on the Oklahoma trip, because that was big for me. I learned a lot about not just fishing, but making content. So that's, you know, that bass fishing dude, Brandon Mays, Digital Wells, Carlos at Lone Star Kayak Fishing, Jacob Olden, Levis Casting of Jolden Fishing and Cassie Fishing, Rob Rosario. So if you need like a super dope photographer and videographer, Rob Rosario is your dude. Yeah, so want to thank those dudes, and want to thank you, man. Like, again, I when I started this, never thought I'd even be asked to come talk about fishing on a podcast. So just to be here and to kind of share, you know, my story and what I like to do is really awesome. So I appreciate you a lot.
Absolutely, man, and thank you for coming on the show. Before I let you go, where do people find you if they want to follow you? Where do they find you?
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram at ASAP_fishing. And you can find me on YouTube as just ASAP Fishing. I didn't use the underscore there. And I'm on TikTok as well, but I don't really know how to use it. So it's the same thing as ASAP_fishing, but the content over there is a little bit more sparse than on Instagram and on YouTube, because I'm still, still trying to figure out that thing. That thing is confusing, but yeah, you can find me in all those places.
Awesome. Well, again, Aaron, man, thank you so much for coming on the show. I have thoroughly enjoyed it.
Well, thank you, man. So have I.
Absolutely. Savior Outdoors gives me confidence that no matter what happens, what I take on the water is coming back home with me. With retrieval devices for fishing rods, bow fishing bows, action cams, and even one that can be attached to your other gear, they've got your whole arsenal covered. When one of these devices goes in the drink, it releases a float attached to your gear by 60 feet of line so you can get it back, and the pressure-sensitive filter means that you don't have to worry about rain or dips in the water while landing a fish. At SaviorOutdoors.com, that's SAVUR Outdoors.com, you can use promo code FNFP15 to save 15% and try them for yourself. Atollas, based out of Charleston, South Carolina, is an eyewear accessory and gear company focused on enhancing your time on the water. Their floating sunglass retainers are the most technically advanced around. Over 5 years of engineering, testing, and exhaustive feedback from paddlers, anglers, and watermen have resulted in a patented design in a class of its own. They're incredibly light and comfortable, built for durability, sport a sleek, minimal design, float virtually all brands and models of sunglasses, and they're backed for life. So if you break them, Atollas will replace them. No questions asked. Whether you're fishing, kayaking, or boating, Atollas will save your shades from the drink. Head on over to atollas.co to check out their gear and use promo code faithnfish15, that's faith the letter N, fish the number 1, 5, at checkout to save 15% on your order. Another huge thank you to Aaron for coming on the show, sharing his story, and talking youth ministry with us. If you want to follow his adventures, I will leave all of his links in the show notes. There will also be the All Things Faith and Fishing link in the show notes that will have all of the sponsor links. It will have YouTube channel, and it will have the social media website, all of that good stuff in there. And before I let y'all go, I do since you made it to the end with us, I know you're a serious listener, so I want to kind of throw this out there. I said this last episode too. I'm thinking about adding a co-host up in here. So if you are interested in being a part of the podcast, please reach out. Through social media or email, however you can get a hold of me. And I'm going to be very picky about this process, but I definitely want to hear from you and have a conversation with you if you're interested. So reach out, and that is going to do it for this episode. Y'all take care, and God bless. Thank you for listening to the Faith and Fishing podcast. Faith and Fishing is produced and hosted by me, Cam Steele, and is sponsored by Jade's Jigs, Get Outdoors Pedal and Paddle, Savior Outdoors, Atollas, and Mr. B Lure Company. Be sure to give us a rating and a review, and to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. That's going to do it for this episode. Y'all take care, and God bless.